Hello everyone, and welcome to our series, The Tithe as a Foreshadowing of the Messiah. In today's video, we will establish from Scripture that God is the one who pays the ultimate tithe. Now, in previous videos, we've shown that the tithe belongs to the Levites and no one else. We've shown that the tithe belongs to those who do the work of the Levites, that is the priesthood, making sacrifices unto the forgiveness of sin. It is also given as an inheritance because God promised land to the descendants of Abraham, but God tells Aaron, well, the Levites aren't going to get any land, but in lieu of that, they are going to get the tithe that comes out of the land. And then finally, in the very last video, we showed that it is the nation of Israel that pays the tithe. And so when we talk about God paying the tithe, we're not supplanting or contradicting what we said before. We're just adding to it. We want to emphasize that there is a tithe, and then there is the tithe. So Leviticus 27 sets the stage. Any tithe of the land. Very important to understand that the tithe comes from the land. Okay, right. So we're going to do a video on the intricalities of that in the future, but we just want to note for this video that the tithe comes from the land, the exact same land that God showed Abraham back in Genesis 12. Now, the land brings out the tithe, and this tithe belongs to the Lord. Let's take another look at this core verse about the tithe law. I, God speaking, have given all the tithes. What this plainly says is that God is going to give a tithe. He is going to give not just a tithe, he is going to give the tithe. Okay. Notice the past tense. Now this is common for prophetic statements. This is when God has decided on his throne, right? God lives in eternity. So when he makes the decision, as far as he's concerned, the job is done. Okay. Now in our earthly timeline, it might not have happened yet. But in God's timeline, it's already done. And so when God says, I, God, have given all the tithes, that means that God has decided that he is going to give a tithe, but it hasn't quite happened for us yet. And as an example of this, let's take a look at Numbers chapter 27. God is speaking to Moses, and he says, get up on the mountain and see the land I have given to the Israelites. Had God given the Israelites, as far as the human timeline, has that been happening yet? No, it hasn't happened yet. The Israelites were not in the land. They were outside of the land, marching towards the land, okay? It had not happened yet, but as far as God is concerned, he had decided on his throne that he was going to do this, and so he is using the past tense, I have given, right? We see this again. You must dispossess. God has given an instruction based upon the fact that God has decided in heaven that it is already a done deal. You must dispossess the inhabitants of the land and live in it, for I have given you the land to possess it. As far as the timeline, in Numbers 33, the Israelites had not gotten the land yet. But God is saying, I have given it to you, past tense. Okay. Deuteronomy 1:8, I have already given. Look, I have already given. This is the exact same phraseology we see in Numbers 18. See, I have given, right, to the Levites all the tithes in Israel. Look, I have already given the land to you. Go and occupy the territory that I, the Lord, promised to give to your ancestors. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, this is a promise. God gave Abraham a promise, and so we have an inheritance to those who come after Abraham, and that land is given to the nation of Israel, and the tithe that comes up out of the land is given to the nation of Israel. Isaiah 53, we have this exact same issue, right? This past tense of something that God has decided, but as far as Isaiah is concerned in his earthly time frame, it hasn't happened yet. God, as far as God is concerned, it's already happened. But as far as Isaiah is concerned, it hasn't happened yet. So he's making a prophetic statement into the future. And he's saying, all of us have wandered off like sheep. Each of us has strayed off of his own path. But the Lord has called the sin of all of us to attack him. This, of course, has precedence for the tithe, because the tithe is all about getting rid of our sin. So Isaiah is prophesying into the future about someone who will carry the sin, just like that sacrifice carries the sin of the nation of Israel. A person will come, and that sin that belongs to us will attack that person. It says here, he was wounded because of our rebellious deeds, right? This is something that God has already decided will happen. God is going to send somebody, and that person will be wounded in the human timeline. But as far as God is concerned, it's already happened. Because of his wounds, we have been healed. That's past tense. God has decided we have been healed. But in the human timeline, it's something that's going to happen in the future. Numbers 18:26. You are to speak to the Levites, and you must tell them, when you receive from the Israelites the tithe that I have given. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting choice of words? What does this mean? God is giving a tithe. If we read it just how it says, God has given a tithe. He has decided to give a tithe, and that tithe is going to come through the Israelites, and it's going to come to the Levite. So God is going to give a tithe, which pays for the remission of sin to the Levite priest through the nation of Israel. That is amazing. God is going to pay the tithe. Not just the nation of Israel. God is going to get in on this law. God has created a law, and God himself is going to fulfill the law that he has created. Let's look at this again. From them as your inheritance, God has promised an inheritance, and that tithe is part of the promise and part of the inheritance. Remember, the inheritance is the land, but the tithe comes out of the land. And God says, dear Levites, I'm giving you the land, but not as the land. I'm giving you the land as the tithe, and this tithe is the remission of sin, and it is a promise. I have promised you are going to inherit a tithe, and this tithe will free you from your sin. Let's look at this again. God is going to pay the tithe, which pays for the remission of sin to the Levite through the nation of Israel as an inheritance based upon the promise of Abraham. Remember the promise of Abraham. We go back to Genesis chapter 12, the very first thing that God says, leave your country, and I'm going to show you a land. And out of that land, the tithe is going to come up. And that tithe is going to be the payment for the remission of sin. And not only is it for the nation of Israel, this remission of sin, this promise is for all the families of the earth. Go back and read Genesis chapter 12. It says, I'm going to show you a land. And then at the very end, it says, you will be a blessing for all peoples. And this is what God is getting at. God has a plan. God has a plan to remove not just the sin of the nation of Israel, but the sin of the entire world. And the tithe is the foreshadowing of God's plan and how he's going to do that.